Beijing Turmoil, More Than Meets the Eye. Appendix Part 2, May 9th. Several hundred journalists in the capital took to the streets and presented a letter signed by 1,013 people from more than 30 news media units and the Shanghai-based World Economic Herald to the All China Journalists Association, asking for dialogues with the leading comrades in charge of propaganda work in the Party Central Committee. The major topics of the dialogues suggested in the letter are 1. The reorganization of the Shanghai-based World Economic Herald and suspending Chen Benli from his duties as the editor-in-chief of the newspaper, which has caused strong reactions at home and abroad. 2. A large-scale student unrest has occurred in the capital. The press circle in the capital has suffered various kinds of restrictions in reporting the important event. Now, it is imperative to secure common understanding in the whole party and nation on how to improve party leadership over the press work. 3. There exists serious malpractice in the work of China's news coverage. The All China Journalists Association promised to convey their opinions to the department concerned and try its best to arrange dialogues. The person who handed in the joint letter said that the journalists signed their names on behalf of themselves instead of their respective units. Beijing University continued class boycott. About 300 college students gathered in front of the All China Journalists Association to support the journalists. College students took to the streets again, spreading leaflets and calling for continued class boycott and a hunger strike. Since then, the situation turned from bad to worse and the turmoil was pushed to a new height. Hu Qi-li, member of the Standing Committee of the Political Bureau of the Party Central Committee and head of the leading group of propaganda and ideological work in the Central Committee, agreed to holding a dialogue with those from the press circle and asked the All China Journalists Association to arrange it as soon as possible. Hu Qi-li gave instructions on the telephone concerning the students' and journalists' demand for dialogues, saying dialogues with students, journalists, and intellectuals and people from other walks of life should be carried on according to the spirit of Zhao Ziyang's May 4th speech. May 10th, Wan Li, chairman of the MPC Standing Committee, presided over a meeting attended by the chairman and vice chairman of the Standing Committee of the 7th National People's Congress to discuss the convening of the 8th session of the Standing Committee. The meeting suggested that the session hear a report on straightening things out in companies and a report on the student demonstrations. It was decided that the session be held around June 20th for a length of about a week. The Beijing Autonomous Union of University Students organized a demonstration on bikes attended by about 10,000 students from 11 universities and colleges. The purpose of the demonstration was to support the journalists' petition for news freedom. The demonstration lasted for 2 hours, causing a traffic jam. Police helped maintain order and clear the way and did not interfere. The number of onlookers reduced greatly. On May 10th and 11th, several thousand students from some of the institutions of higher learning in Taiyuan of Shanxi province took to the streets and staged a sit-in in front of the Yingzi guest house and the provincial government, asking for dialogues with the governor. They interfered with the ongoing International Economic and Technological Cooperation Fair, the Import and Export Commodities Fair, and the Folk Arts Festival, causing extremely bad impressions. More than 100 young writers, including Su Xiaokang, the chief writer of the River Elgi, and editors and journalists from the press units, such as the Writers' Press, Literary Gazette, and Chinese Women Weekly, joined in the students' demonstration on bicycles. At its closing stage, the demonstration drew several 10,000 onlookers on their way home from work. May 11th. The persons in charge of the bureaus for receiving letters and visits under the general offices of the Party Central Committee and the State Council informed the 4 student representatives on the telephone that the petition submitted by them on May 6th had been handed to the Party Central Committee. The Party Central Committee attached great importance to the questions raised by the students, said these persons, and was discussing them and would, within a week, give official answers to the students on the concrete matters relative to the dialogue. They also said that the Party Central Committee understood well the students' anxiety for the dialogue. The government had initially decided on its representatives to the dialogue, including Li Tieying, state councilor and minister of the State Education Commission, and Yan Mingfu, member of the Secretariat of the Party Central Committee and head of the United Front Work Department. In the afternoon, Hu Qi-li went to the China Youth Daily to listen to the opinions of the editors and journalists who had asked for a dialogue and promised to arrange it as soon as possible. May 12th. Wan Li and his party left Beijing for a visit to Canada and the United States. The People's Daily published a commentator's article entitled "Jointly Maintain the Stable Situation." It pointed out, quote, "Most of the students have resumed class. However, part of the students in some universities and colleges in Beijing have not resumed class and continued demonstrations which have affected to a certain extent the city's traffic and normal social order. It is hoped that these students will think it over, take a reasonable attitude, and go back to class as soon as possible so as to jointly maintain the stable situation and the normal order of our country and of all aspects of the social life." End quote. At noon, a notice on starting a hunger strike at Tiananmen Square at 12 o'clock on May 13th was posted on the campuses of Beijing University and Beijing Teachers University. The decision on the hunger strike was made on May 11th by the Autonomous Union of University Students. May 13th. At 2 a.m., leaders of the Autonomous Union of University Students raised the demand for a dialogue, which was accepted 2 hours later by the General Office of the Party Central Committee and that of the State Council. However, the students suddenly canceled the dialogue at daybreak. In the morning, the bureaus for receiving letters and visits under the general offices of the Party Central Committee, the State Council, and the MPC Standing Committee notified students twice of the decision to hold the dialogue with them on May 15th. The students expressed their agreement. However, after the government had agreed to their first proposed name list of 20 participants, they demanded the number be increased to 200. Without waiting for further discussion, they accused the government of being totally insincere towards the dialogue. Only 4 hours after they had been informed of the dialogue, they made public a hunger strike declaration protesting against the government's negative attitude towards the dialogue. May 13th was chosen as the date to start the hunger strike to put pressure on them by way of Gorbachev's China visit. As Wang Dan, leader of the Beijing Autonomous Union of University Students, put it, several hundred college students in Beijing, together with a few Shanghai students, were the first group of Shanghai students to Beijing for presenting a petition, marched to Tiananmen Square for a hunger strike. The fasting students were mainly from Beijing University and Beijing Teachers University. The hunger strike declaration said that the strike was staged to protest against the government's indifference towards the class boycott launched by the Beijing students against its delaying the dialogue with the delegation of the colleges and universities in Beijing, and to urge the government to hold substantive and equal dialogues with the delegation of the Beijing colleges and universities. They also demanded of the government rectification of the name for the student movement. In the evening, 2 groups of students, totaling more than 1,000, joined in the hunger strike. The students supporting them and onlookers reached some 40,000. Students from the Beijing Medical University came to the square with medicines for first aid. In the morning, Li Peng visited the Capital Iron and Steel Company and had a dialogue with the workers and leading cadres on such questions as improving the economic environment, rectifying the economic order, deepening the reform, developing production, and the current situation. When the workers brought forth their opinions on the students' demonstrations, Li Peng said that the government welcomed criticism and suggestions from workers, students, and the broad masses. Some of the opinions from the students, according to Li Peng, did reflect the existing problems in society and in our work, such as the chaos in the economy, bureaucracy, and certain corruptions in party and government departments. The party and government are working out a series of effective measures to solve these problems through democratic and legal channels. We will push the political structural reform further while continuing to deepen the economic structural reform, said Li Peng. In the afternoon, while talking with the representatives of Beijing's workers at the Great Hall of the People, Zhao Ziyang said that he had heard the students had planned for a demonstration during Gorbachev's China visit. He said, "The party and government have been earnestly considering how to meet the reasonable demands recently put forward by students, workers, and other people. Multi-form and multi-channel dialogues are being arranged. Whoever, no matter they are students or other citizens, interfere with the international conference and the Sino-Soviet summit merely because they have complaints against their own units or the government are being unreasonable and will not have sympathy and support from the people. I hope the masses of students will keep their senses, take the interests of the whole into account, and safeguard the prestige and interests of the country conscientiously. Don't respond to or support any action detrimental to the country's interests, to the prestige and image of the Chinese people. Don't do anything for which our friends will feel sorry and our enemy will feel happy." Leading members in charge of propaganda in the party Central Committee respectively went to the Guangming Daily, People's Daily, and the Institute of Journalism of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences to have discussions with the staff there. The staff members raised many criticisms about the news media reform. The leading members stressed the need to carry out the reform along democratic and legal lines. In the evening, Yan Mingfu, member of the Secretariat of the Party Central Committee, invited some students and teachers for a dialogue, including some fasting students who raised some demands at the meeting. Yan Mingfu commented frankly on these demands and promised to convey them accurately to the Party Central Committee. May 14th. A small number of fasting students at Tiananmen Square suffered from vertigo, stomach cramp, and other diseases because of cold and hunger. As the students refused to have contacts with the government, the Beijing municipal government, in the name of the Red Cross Society, sent ambulances for a rescue and had part of the students sent to the hospital. Some college leaders went to Tiananmen Square to try to talk to the fasting students into going back to school, while some teachers and writers expressed their support to the fasting students. In the evening, Yan Jiaqi, Liu Zaifu, Dai Qing, Wen Yuankai, Su Xiaokang, and Bao Zunxin went to Tiananmen Square to convey their sympathy and solicitude to the fasting students. They read out our urgent appeal for the current situation, jointly signed by 12 scholars. The appeal called upon the fasting students to leave Tiananmen Square for the time being for the successful completion of the Sino-Soviet summit, but on 3 preconditions. 1. Leaders of the Party Central Committee should make a statement affirming the student unrest as a patriotic democratic movement. 2. The government should not resort to violence or square accounts after the autumn harvest with the students. 3. The authorities should admit the student organization that leads the student movement is legal. If these demands were not met, the appeal declared they would support the student struggle through to the end. Before dawn, 2 students from Hong Kong declared to the fasting students on the square that they would donate 140,000 Hong Kong dollars to them as funds for the student movement. After that, the 2 students joined in the hunger strike. In the morning, the General Office of the Party Central Committee informed the Student Dialogue delegation of its proposal on holding a dialogue in the afternoon and of its decision to cancel the quota restriction 20 with regard to the number of students to be allowed to attend the dialogue. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the Student Dialogue delegation arrived at the United Front Work Department. The dialogue started at 4:30 and adjourned at 7:15. Representatives of the fasting students at Tiananmen Square also attended the dialogue. Student delegates put forward 3 topics for the dialogue. 1. How to evaluate the student movement. 2. How to guarantee the rights of citizens prescribed in Article 35 of the Constitution. 3. How to promote China's reform. The dialogue centered mainly on the first question, on which no identical views were reached, with either party expressing its own opinions. Leading members of the State Council in the departments concerned, such as Li Tieying, Yan Mingfu, and Wei Jianxing, attended the dialogue. At 2:30 a.m., Li Tieying, Li Shiming, Chen Shitong, An Chengxin, Li Qiyan, Wang Jialiu, and Zhang Jianmin went to Tiananmen Square to persuade the students to go back to school, but the fasting students would not hear of it. The Beijing Public Security Bureau announced the enforcement of traffic control in the areas around Tiananmen Square and the Great Hall of the People to guarantee success for Gorbachev and his party's China visit. May 15th. In the small hours, there were still tens of thousands of people gathered at Tiananmen Square. The number of students on hunger strike increased from the original several hundred to nearly 2,000. As the fasting students continued their hunger strike disregarding persuasions, the welcoming ceremony for the Soviet delegation headed by Gorbachev was forced to be held at the airport. A group of intellectuals in Beijing, including Yan Jiaqi, Liu Zaifu, Su Xiaozhi, and Su Xiaokang, jointly issued a May declaration expressing their 6-point views on the current situation. They declared: 1. The attitude of the party and government towards the present situation movement is not sensible. 2. The legal status of the autonomous student organization must be recognized. 3. The biggest error during the 10-year reform does not lie in education, but in overlooking the reform of the political structure. 4. Without realizing freedom of the press and lifting the ban on non-governmental newspapers, any hope for and promise on opening up and reform will become a mere scrap of paper. 5. It is wrong to describe the current student movement as anti-party, anti-socialist political turmoil. And 6. The assertion about ferreting out a handful of abettors and bearded backstage manipulators is wrong. Ever since the students' hunger strike began on May 13th, some university and college teachers got involved in the student movement. 283 teachers from Beijing University submitted a written statement urging the authorities to start dialogues as soon as possible and to guarantee the safety of the lives of the fasting students. In the evening, a group of demonstrators holding a banner of teachers of Tsinghua University marched into Tiananmen Square. Today, a teachers' strike broke out at Beijing University. In the afternoon, intellectuals in Beijing demonstrated at Tiananmen Square to express their support to the fasting students. In the front of the procession were Yan Jiaqi, Bao Zunshun, Ke Yunlo, and Wang Luxiang, followed by tens of thousands of professors, lecturers, researchers, doctoral and master degree holders, and staff members from more than 60 units, such as institutes under the Chinese Academy of Sciences, Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Beijing University, and Tsinghua University. At 9 a.m., the All China Students Federation and Beijing Municipal Students Federation invited 43 students from Beijing's universities and colleges to have a dialogue in Zhengxie Auditorium with Li Tieying, Yan Mingfu, and other leaders of the party central committee, the State Council, and relevant departments of Beijing municipality. During the 3-hour dialogue, the students asked the party central committee to make a correct and clear evaluation of the current student movement and retract the label of turmoil put on the movement. The leaders acknowledged once more the patriotic zeal of the students and expressed their hope for practice itself to speak for the student movement. They also warned the students that the development of events is always independent of people's goodwill, that they should appeal to reason and solve the problems through democratic and legal means. The students also raised other demands, such as for the resigning of Yuan Mu and He Dongchang and the reinstatement of Chen Benli as editor-in-chief of the World Economic Herald. At midnight, the general offices of the Party Central Committee and the State Council made a broadcast speech to the students on Tiananmen Square, persuading them to go back to the campus as soon as possible. The speech goes as follows. The party and government are reviewing the sensible opinions and demands put forward by the students and will take practical measures to solve the problems. What we need now is cool-headedness, reason, restraint, and order. At present, the Sino-Soviet summit is underway. It is a great event attracting world attention. We hope the students will take the whole situation into account and not do anything harmful to the dignity and interests of our country. Now, since the students' sit-in and fasting have lasted for a fairly long time, and it is getting cold at night, some students have fallen ill. Leaders of the Party Central Committee and the State Council are deeply concerned and hope they will go back to school as soon as possible. May 16th. When meeting with Gorbachev, Zhao Ziyang said, Comrade Deng Xiaoping has all along been the acknowledged leader of our party at home and abroad. Though he has retired from the Central Committee and the Politburo Standing Committee, our party still needs Comrade Deng Xiaoping, his wisdom and experience. Therefore, it is the earnest decision of the first plenary session of the 13th Party Central Committee that Comrade Deng Xiaoping's helmsmanship is still needed for the most important issues. We have always reported to Comrade Deng Xiaoping and asked for his advices while dealing with the most important issues, and Comrade Deng Xiaoping always gives his all-out support for our work and for our collective decisions. When this talk was made public, the number of demonstrators in the attack on Comrade Deng Xiaoping reached an all-time high. Posters and slogans demanding down with Deng Xiaoping and Deng Xiaoping should step down were all around among the demonstrators. At Tiananmen Square, even the rumor was spread about Deng Xiaoping having resigned, and some people even began to set off firecrackers. Meanwhile, slogans like "Support Zhao Ziyang, Long Live Zhao Ziyang," and "Zhao Ziyang be promoted chairman of the Central Military Commission" could be seen and heard in the demonstrators' processions and at Tiananmen Square. The hunger strike launched by Beijing's college students came to its 4th day, and the fasting students totaled 3,000. Some of Beijing University's teachers also participated in the hunger strike. 600 strikers had passed out, and more than 20 hospitals had provided medical service. By the afternoon, a total of 5,000 bottles or bags of glucose saline had been sent to Tiananmen Square by the Beijing Emergency Center. Medical workers from 22 hospitals and teachers and students of medical colleges working on the rescue site called upon the Beijing Municipal Red Cross Society promptly to adopt measures to safeguard the lives and safety of the fasting students. In the meantime, 1,200 fasting students jointly signed a statement extending their respects to the Municipal Red Cross Society and the medical workers. Some university and college leading cadres, members of the CPPCC National Committee, and leaders of Democratic parties tried earnestly to persuade the students through every channel to end their hunger strike. 10 university presidents jointly published an open letter concerning the hunger strike and petition launched by some college students in Beijing. The letter reads, "We sincerely hope that the students, teachers, and people from other walks of life will, out of their sense of responsibility for the lives and health of the fasting students and for the future of our country, pool their efforts to direct the development of events towards reason and order and to save the students unnecessary costs." Demonstrators from Beijing's educational trade union, scientific and technological press, literary and art circles entered Tiananmen Square in succession to express their support to the fasting students, members of the China Democratic League, the Revolutionary Committee of the Chinese Kuomintang, and the Jiusan Society, as well as middle school students and teachers and factory workers and staff were also seen among the demonstrators at Tiananmen Square. The demonstrators at the maximum totaled more than 500,000, and traffic was held up in the part of Chang'an Avenue between Fuxingmen and Dongdan. Professors, teachers, and staff members from Beijing University formed a Support the University Student Corps. Meanwhile, more than 100 professors signed a letter demanding the resigning of He Dongcheng, Vice Minister of the State Education Commission. Editors and reporters demonstrated at Tiananmen Square to support the fasting students. They distributed the statement of the capital's press circle for supporting the fasting students. The statement said, 1. The hunger strike and petition of Beijing's college students is a majestic, patriotic act. 2. We strongly protest against the bureaucratic and indifferent attitude of the authorities towards the patriotic students on hunger strike. And 3. We vehemently demand that the authorities start an earliest dialogue with representatives of the fasting students on the basis of sincerity and equality. Yan Jiaqi took the lead in taking part in the demonstrations staged by some people from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in support of the fasting students, and co-published a May 16th declaration, again trying to exact from the party and government the acknowledgement that the Autonomous Students Organization was legal, and that the April 26th People's Daily editorial was wrong. May 17th. Members of the Politburo Standing Committee of the Party Central Committee discussed the issue of declaring martial law in parts of Beijing. The majority were for it, but Zhao Ziyang cast a negative vote. On the same day, a few people who had access to top party and state secrets gave the information away. A person who worked at the side of Zhao Ziyang said to the leaders of the illegal student organization, "The troops are about to suppress you. All others have agreed. Zhao Ziyang was the only one who was against it. You must get prepared." In the evening, Bao Tong, former secretary of Zhao Ziyang, summoned some people from the Political Structural Reform Research Center of the Party Central Committee for a meeting. After divulging the secret on declaring the martial law, he made a farewell speech in which he warned the attendants not to reveal the schemes worked out at the meeting, saying that anyone who revealed them would be a traitor, a Judas. Before dawn, Zhao Ziyang made a written speech on behalf of the Politburo Standing Committee of the Party Central Committee. In his speech, he confirmed the patriotic enthusiasm of the masses of students and promised not to square accounts after the autumn harvest. He hoped the students would take care of themselves, end their hunger strike, and recover their health. At 10 p.m., Li Tieying, Minister of the State Education Commission, went successively to the Peking Union Medical College Hospital, Beijing Hospital, and Tongren Hospital to see students down with the hunger strike and wished them quick recovery. Xiang Wei, standing committee member of the Autonomous Union of University Students, and others, asked to see the leading official of the Red Cross Society of China. They claimed to the leading official that the International Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization stipulated that the International Red Cross should conduct a checkup of those who had fasted for 3 days or more and had the right to intervene in the hunger strike. The leading official replied that there is only one UNESCO on Earth, and it has never stipulated that someone may intervene in hunger strikes in a certain country. At 1 o'clock in the morning, 80 members of the Municipal Red Cross Society and 16 ambulances and 2 coaches arrived at Tiananmen Square. Several hundred students feeble after 3 or more days of hunger strike were sent to the hospitals. However, at about 4 o'clock, the Autonomous Union of University Students unilaterally declared the Municipal Red Cross Society as non grata, and drove away doctors and nurses who had come to rescue the students. After the Municipal Red Cross Society was shooed away, many angry students questioned leaders of the Autonomous Union of University Students how they could ensure the safety and lives of the fasting students. Only then did these leaders apologize to the Red Cross Society and invite them back, doctors and nurses. During the 7-day hunger strike, the Red Cross Society mobilized more than 100 ambulances and 2,000 beds in 52 hospitals so that students who suffered from shock or illness because of the hunger strike could get first aid and timely treatment. The Red Cross Society also provided the fasting students with drinking water, edible salt and sugar, day and night, and supplied an adequate amount of medicines for preventing sunstroke, cold, and diarrhea. Hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets to show their support to the fasting students. Among them, besides Beijing's college students and teachers, were cadres of state organs, members of democratic parties, journalists, and people from industrial and commercial circles. college students from Shanghai, Hebei, Shandong, Xinjiang, Henan, Shanxi, and Tianjin also took part in the demonstrations in Beijing. 4 Democratic parties, 4 medical university and college presidents, professors of the Chinese University of Science and Technology, and 20 writers issued urgent appeals calling upon chief party and state leaders promptly to hold dialogues with the students. Yang Jieqi, Bao Zunqin, and others published a May 17th declaration. They swore, "Because the autocrat controls the unlimited power, the government has lost its obligation and normal human feelings. Despite Qing dynasty's death 76 years ago, there is still an emperor in China, though without such a title, a senile and fatuous autocrat." They said yesterday afternoon General Secretary Zhao Ziyang declared publicly that all decisions in China must be approved by this decrepit autocrat. Gerontocratic politics must end, and the autocrat must resign. The declaration claimed the students have proclaimed through their action that the current student movement is not a turmoil but a great patriotic democratic movement with the aim to bury dictatorship and the autocratic monarchy in China. May 18th. At 5 a.m., members of the Politburo Standing Committee of the Party Central Committee, Zhao Ziyang, Li Peng, Jiao Shi, and Hu Qili went to the Peking Union Medical College Hospital and Tongren Hospital to see hospitalized fasting students. In the morning, Li Peng and other state leaders met with representatives of the fasting students. Li Peng suggested that all fasting students be immediately sent to hospitals by the Red Cross Society. He also stressed, no matter how much common ground or difference we have, the first thing we should do right now is to save the lives of the fasting students. The government should not shirk its duty on this matter. I have given instructions to all the large hospitals to try every possible way to get beds and necessary medical apparatus ready for receiving the fasting students. Representatives of the students insisted that only when the government has recognized the present student unrest as a great patriotic democratic movement will they change the hunger strike to a sit-down protest. Li Peng said, "We have all along confirmed the students' patriotic enthusiasm. Your intentions are good, but the situation is developing independent of your goodwill and imagination and your patriotic enthusiasm. As a matter of fact, social order in Beijing has been disturbed, and this has spread to the whole country." This meeting ended without any outcome. On this 6th day of the hunger strike, the fasting students totaled more than 3,000. More than 2,000 persons had passed out and been sent to the hospital, some of them more than once. The number of fasting students refusing to drink water had increased to 30, of whom 17 were in front of Xinhua Men Gate. A torrential rain was forecasted to come today. At 5 o'clock the previous afternoon, the Municipal Red Cross Society received a notice of the municipal government for protecting the fasting students from rain. The Red Cross Society suggested to use buses as shelter, but Guo Haifeng, leader of the Autonomous Union of University Students, asked for tents so as to occupy Tiananmen Square for a long period of time in the future. The Red Cross Society explained that buses were easy to clean and sterilize, and tents were liable to take in water and breed bacteria. After repeated persuasion and explanation at 2 o'clock in the morning, the Autonomous Union of University Students finally consented to sheltering the fasting students in buses. While the fasting students moved into the 78 buses with cheers, the Autonomous Union of University Students tore up the agreement on protecting the buses. Many tires were pricked or flattened, and some engines were destroyed. Beijing Municipal Environmental Protection and Public Hygiene Bureau began to clear up the garbage and to spray high-effect disinfectant at Tiananmen Square so as to prevent the occurrence of contagious diseases. Because of the day-after-day demonstrations, 49 bus lines on the city's major communication lines were blocked. The daily life and work of 1.53 million commuters were affected. Some commercial and service enterprises suffered losses, and soy sauce, vinegar, and eggs were out of stock. May 19th. In the small hours of today, Zhao Ziyang, Li Peng, and other party and state leaders went to Tiananmen Square to see the students on hunger strike. Zhao Ziyang got on a bus and shook hands with the fasting students. He said, "We have come too late. You mean good and you all wish our country well. The problems you raised will be solved eventually, but things are complicated and it takes time to resolve these problems. I sincerely hope you'll end your hunger strike at once. Once you stop the hunger strike, the party and government will continue to hold dialogues with you." In the evening, the Party Central Committee and the State Council convened a meeting of cadres from the party government and military institutions in Beijing. At the meeting, a decision on taking resolute measures to stop the turmoil was announced. Prior to this, in order to uphold the party's unity, the Standing Committee of the Politburo of the Party Central Committee decided that Zhao Ziyang and Li Peng each make a speech at the meeting, but Zhao Ziyang refused. Then he was asked to preside over the meeting instead of speaking, but again he refused. Finally, he even refused to attend the meeting. By doing so, he openly revealed his attitude of separating himself from the party before the whole party and the whole world at a critical moment when the party and the country were in a life-and-death struggle. In the same evening, Qiao Shi, member of the Politburo Standing Committee of the Party Central Committee, presided over a meeting attended by cadres of the party, government, and military institutions under the central authorities and Beijing municipality. Li Peng spoke at the meeting on behalf of the Politburo Standing Committee of the Party Central Committee. President Yang Shangkun also gave a speech. Li Shiming, Politburo member and Party Secretary of Beijing, first introduced the outbreak and development of the student movement in Beijing in recent times and the grave influence of the turmoil on various social aspects of Beijing. In his speech, Li Peng pointed out that the capital was in a critical situation. The anarchic state was aggravated and law and discipline were being violated. The situation in Beijing is deteriorating and has already affected many other cities in the country, said Li Peng. Our country's reform and opening up, our modernization drive, and the future of the People's Republic are seriously threatened. The very small handful of turmoil abettors want, through the turmoil, to reach their political goal, negating the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party and the socialist system, a goal which runs counter to the Constitution and which cannot reach through democratic and legal channels. Li Peng stressed that the patriotic enthusiasm of the young people must be protected. They must be strictly differentiated from the tiny number of people who incited the turmoil, and they would not be penalized for their radical words and actions in the student unrest. He said that the party and the government would continue to have extensive and active dialogues with the broad masses of students and people from other walks of life, including students who had participated in the demonstrations, sit-down protests, class boycotts, and the hunger strike, at different levels, through various channels, and in various forms, so as to fully understand opinions from all quarters. Li Peng said, "We shall give clear answers to the students' reasonable demands. We shall attentively listen to and accept their sensible criticisms and suggestions, such as to punish official profiteers, eliminate corruption, and get rid of bureaucracy, so as to conscientiously improve the work of the party and the government." Li Peng hoped that the fasting students at Tiananmen Square would call off the hunger strike immediately, leave the square, accept medical treatment, and recover their health soon, that the masses of students and people of various circles would stop their demonstrations at once and out of humanitarianism cease their support for the fasting students. No matter what their intentions were, he declared any further support would push the fasting students on to the road to death. On behalf of the Party Central Committee and the State Council, Li Peng called upon the whole party, the whole army, and the people, of all nationalities, to unite as one and work together with one heart to contribute their bit, at their posts, to the checking of the turmoil and the stabilization of the situation. Yang Shangkun also spoke at the meeting. He said, "I fully endorse the speech given by Comrade Li Peng on behalf of the Politburo Standing Committee of the Party Central Committee. Recently, the normal order in people's work, production, and daily lives in Beijing has been disrupted. In actuality, many social aspects have fallen into anarchy. To maintain the capital's public security and restore normal social order, we have no alternative but to call some PLA troops in to assist the armed police and public security personnel in Beijing in their work. They are not aimed at the students. I hope people of various circles will fully understand and support this." That night, troops began to move in from various directions towards the city proper of Beijing in trucks and armored cars, only to be stopped at the outskirts by students and residents who had learned of this beforehand. Today, leaflets signed by the Preparatory Committee of the Beijing Autonomous Union of Workers were found, which threatened the Party Central Committee and the State Council must satisfy the two demands of the fasting students unconditionally within 24 hours. Otherwise, we shall stage a general workers' strike in the city at 12 o'clock on May 20th. At about 4 in the afternoon, someone holding a piece of paper and identifying himself as a staff member of a certain organization under the Party Central Committee went to the Tiananmen Square headquarters and revealed the top secret that martial law was about to be declared in parts of Beijing. Thus, at 9 o'clock, 45 minutes before the meeting called by the central authorities and attended by cadres from the party, government, and military institutions, Chai Ling, commander-in-chief of the fasting contingent, declared change of the hunger strike to a sit-down protest. Gao Shan, Deputy Bureau Director of the Political Structural Reform Research Center under the Party Central Committee, hurried to the Economic Structural Reform Institute to pass on to those who were holding a meeting the so-called instructions from the above. After that, presided over by Chen Yizi, the Institute Director, they drafted a 6-point statement on the current situation in the name of the 4 units of the Research Institute for Reform of the Economic System. The Research Institute of Development of the Agricultural Research Center under the State Council. The Research Institute for International Affairs of the China International Trust and Investment Corporation, and the Beijing Young Economist Society. The statement, which was broadcasted at Tiananmen Square and distributed widely, demanded publicizing the inside story of the decision-making of the top leaders and the divergence of opinions among them, and convening a special session of the National People's Congress and a special Congress of the Chinese Communist Party. It also urged the students on Tiananmen Square to end their hunger strike as soon as possible, hinting that the government would adopt an extreme action military control. Soon after that, some people who identified themselves as employees of the State Commission for Restructuring the Economy went to Tiananmen Square to deliver a speech in which they said, "With deep grief and extreme anger, we now disclose a piece of absolutely true news. General Secretary Zhao Ziyang has been dismissed from his post." They called on the workers, students, and shopkeepers to carry out nationwide strikes and instigated the masses to take immediate actions to fight a life-and-death struggle. The speech was soon printed in the form of People's Daily Extra and was widely distributed. May 20th. Premier Li Peng signed and issued an order of the State Council of the People's Republic of China on declaring martial law in parts of Beijing. The full text is as follows, quote, "A serious turmoil has taken place in Beijing, and social stability, people's normal life, and social order have been disrupted. In order to firmly stop the unrest, maintain social tranquility in Beijing, safeguard the safety of the lives and property of the citizens, protect public property, and ensure the normal function of the central departments in the Beijing municipal government, and as empowered by Clause 16 of Article 89 of the Constitution of the People's Republic of China, the State Council has decided to execute martial law in parts of Beijing as from 10 o'clock on May 20th, 1989. The order shall be implemented by the Beijing Municipal People's Government, which is to take concrete measures according to practical needs." End quote. Mayor Chen Shitong signed orders of the Beijing Municipal People's Government. Quote, Order 1. In accordance with the order of the State Council signed by Premier Li Peng to declare martial law in parts of Beijing, and in order to quickly check the social turmoil and maintain the normal order in the work, production, teaching, and study, scientific research, and social life in the capital, the Beijing Municipal People's Government hereby orders 1. As from 10 o'clock on May 20th, 1989, martial law is enforced in the eastern, western, Chongwen, Shunwu, Shijingshan, Haidian, Fengtai, and Chaoyang districts. 2. Under the martial law, demonstrations, petition class boycotts, work stoppage, and other activities of amassing people to impede the normal order are banned. 3. People are banned to use any form to create and spread rumors, establish links, make public speeches, or distribute leaflets to incite social turmoil. 4. It is prohibited to assault leading organs of the party, the government, and the army, to assault broadcasting, television, communications, and other key units, to sabotage important public facilities, or to engage in all disruptive activities, such as beating, smashing, looting, and setting fire. 5. It is prohibited to harass embassies of all countries and agencies of the United Nations in Beijing. 6. Public security officers, the armed police, and PLA soldiers on duty have the right to use every means to forcibly deal with the above prohibited activities should they occur during the enforcement of the martial law. It is hoped that all residents will observe the above items. Chen Shitong, Mayor, May 20th, 1989, end quote. Quote, Order 2. To implement the order of the State Council to enforce martial law in parts of Beijing, and to maintain the normal order in the capital, the Beijing Municipal People's Government hereby orders 1. Foreigners must observe all orders issued by the Beijing Municipal People's Government in accordance with Premier of the State Council Li Peng's order on declaring martial law. 2. During the period of the martial law, foreigners are not allowed to get involved in any activities of Chinese citizens in violating the martial law. 3. The personnel on duty have the right to adopt every means to stop any activities violating the above provisions. Chen Shitong, Mayor, May 20th, 1989, end quote. Quote, Order 3. During the period of the martial law, special regulations are made on news coverage. 1. Chinese or foreign journalists are strictly forbidden to utilize press coverage to make demagogic reporting. 2. Journalists from abroad, as well as from Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, are forbidden to go to government institutions, people's organizations, schools, factories, mines, enterprises, and neighborhoods to conduct interviews, take pictures, or make videotapes without approval by the Beijing Municipal People's Government. 3. The personnel on duty have the right to stop any activities violating the above regulations. Chen Shitong, Mayor, May 20th, 1989, end quote. The People's Daily announced, some people have been found to usurp the name of People's Daily to print and distribute the so-called People's Daily Extra. We solemnly declare that we have not issued a single extra for about a decade. It is hereby announced for public inspection. Tens of thousands of students and residents took to the crossroads and highways at the outskirts of Beijing to stop the martial law enforcement troops and armed police. They used buses as roadblocks to obstruct the advance of military vehicles and surrounded the troops in throngs of dozens, hundreds, or even thousands, seriously interfering with their operations. Ground transportation was completely paralyzed. Subways were forced to be closed at 10 o'clock. Panic purchasing took place. Some people wrote to the Electric Power Administrative Bureau threatening to mobilize 600 to 700 people to sabotage the power supply. May 21st. The headquarters of the PLA martial law enforcement troops published a letter to Beijing residents, announcing that the martial law troops had come to Beijing to restore the normal order, not to suppress the students, and hoping that students and people from all walks of life would understand this fully and give them energetic support. In the afternoon, a person identifying himself as representative of the students on Tiananmen Square asked to see the leading officers of the martial law enforcement troops. Liu Zhijun, director of a regiment's political department, and 2 film projectionists had a talk with him. Liu Zhijun said, I have been in Beijing for more than one day. I find the situation here is very chaotic. Though the students are well organized and try to help maintain order, a number of people are creating disturbances. If this situation is not checked immediately, the order in work and in society at large will be seriously disruptive. Talking about the patriotic enthusiasm and goodwill of the students, Liu Zhijun said, if the students really love their country, they should immediately stop their demonstrations and class boycotts and leave Tiananmen Square for the sake of our nation and our country. Only when they do so can the situation quiet down. When asked about the position of the troops, Liu Zhijun said, we are exercising restraint in pursuance of the central authorities' policy. This does not mean we are inactive towards the enforcement of the martial law. I think the earlier the students retreat from Tiananmen Square, the better. There is one thing I can tell you. The soldiers will not fire at the students, but we will never be soft on those die-hard anti-government saboteurs. Marshals Nie Rongjin and Xu Xiangqian gave separate replies to the students of the Chinese University of Science and Technology. They said that the martial law troops came to Beijing not to suppress the students, and they hoped the students would not believe rumors and return to their schools and resume class at once. The Xinhua news agency transmitted the Liberation Army daily editorial entitled Major Measures for Maintaining Stability in the Capital and in the Whole Country. Zhang Baifa, permanent vice mayor of Beijing, gave a speech at a Beijing television station appealing to residents for common efforts to maintain public transportation order. Wan Li, chairman of the Standing Committee of the 7th National People's Congress, who was visiting Canada, told overseas Chinese and Chinese Canadian in Toronto, we will firmly protect the patriotic enthusiasm of the young people and maintain the stability of social order in China. Today was the second day of the declaration of the martial law. At night, some students and residents who were unaware of the significance of enforcing the martial law put up roadblocks at major crossroads in the outskirts of Beijing to stop the advance of military vehicles. Buses and trolleys in the urban area were held up and the subway ceased operation. Residents complained that they could not read newspapers or drink fresh milk. The Research Institute of Social Development of the Stone Company drafted a proposal for the emergency meeting by the NPC Standing Committee. This written proposal was first delivered to Hu Ji-wei, member of the NPC Standing Committee, who examined it and added, if an immediate meeting of the members of the NPC Standing Committee is impossible, we propose an informal emergency meeting of members of the NPC Standing Committee in Beijing. After signing his name, Hu Ji-wei agreed to take up this matter and entrusted the Institute to solicit signatures. Thus, the Institute made long-distance calls or sent urgent telegrams to the NPC Standing Committee members outside Beijing for their signatures. Yan Jiaqi and others planned to establish a union of intellectuals first in Beijing and with removing Li Peng as the general goal. They also sent a telegram to leaders of the NPC Standing Committee demanding the immediate convening of an emergency meeting by the NPC Standing Committee. University students from Beijing and other parts of China continued their sit-down protest at Tiananmen Square. At the same time, 7,000 students from other parts of China left Beijing for their schools. May 22nd. Deng Yingchao published her letter to the capital's students and residents. The letter said, "I'm also very much concerned and worried about Beijing's situation in recent months. I think none of us wants this situation to go on. All of us want stability and unity. I sincerely hope you'll have faith in our party, in the People's Government, and in the PLA. The PLA troops have been ordered to come to Beijing to maintain social order in the capital and guarantee us a normal environment for work, study, and living. I hope the students and residents will give the PLA their vigorous support." The Beijing municipal government and the headquarters of the martial law troops issued a public announcement calling for the restoration of normal order in the capital. The announcement said, "At present, the production and living order in the capital is in great confusion. Traffic is held up in many places and public transportation is still at a standstill. Production and work in some units are disrupted. Teaching and studying in schools is still abnormal. Environmental sanitation in the urban area is worrisome. A tiny number of dubious characters can seize the opportunity to make troubles and disturb public order. They block and loot military vehicles, beat soldiers, set up illegal checkposts to search passerby, and inspect identification cards. What is more, a motorcycle team barges about the streets and greatly endangers residents' safety and lives. All these have caused great dissatisfaction and anxiety among the masses in the capital, who eagerly desire quick restoration of the social order." After the martial law was declared in parts of Beijing, one of the major tactics of the organizers and schemers of the turmoil was to coerce the NPC Standing Committee into convening a meeting before the due time and adopting a decision first to countermand the martial law order of the State Council and then to hold a special NPC meeting to remove the current government. For this purpose, Wan Runan, general manager of the Stone Company, called together some leaders of the Autonomous Union of University Students in the International Hotel and listed the following 6 conditions for retreat from Tiananmen Square: withdrawal of the troops, cancellation of the martial law, removal of Li Peng, retirement of Deng Xiaoping and Yang Shangkun, and reinstatement of Zhao Ziyang. They also planned to organize a grand victory march at midnight. Meanwhile, the few members of the Beijing intellectual circle who took the lead in supporting the students' hunger strike published articles in Hong Kong newspapers trying to mold public opinions outside the mainland to put pressure on the NPC Standing Committee. The Autonomous Union of University Students set up the Provisional Tiananmen Square headquarters, which not only organized and directed the sit-down protest at Tiananmen Square, but also instigated the students and residents to obstruct military vehicles and surround the troops at crossroads. In the meantime, the Union raised the call for repudiating the charge of turmoil and urgently convening meetings of the National People's Congress and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, and for persisting in occupation of Tiananmen Square. Today was the 3rd day of the martial law enforcement. In the afternoon, several thousand people demonstrated holding banners of the capital's intellectual, educational, literary, and art and press circles. From 12:30 to 4 a.m., a grave incident took place in Xiangtan City, Hunan Province. A small number of ruffians assaulted the municipal government and engaged in beating, smashing, looting, and burning. Public security officers and some students having to sit down at the site worked together to protect the government office compound and maintain order. At about 10 o'clock in the evening, a martial law enforcement unit halted at Dajing in Fengtai district was ordered to move away. Then, dubious characters began to spread rumors to agitate the crowd. Some other dubious characters, passing themselves off as students and onlookers, made sudden attacks upon the troops and students with the bricks and tiles they had gathered beforehand. With a great show of restraint, the soldiers retreated, at the same time trying to protect the students. More than 60 soldiers, 11 students, and 13 residents were injured. 10 raiders were detained. May 23rd. The State Education Commission issued an urgent call asking people from various circles to urge university students to resume class. The Central Committee of the Communist Youth League of China called upon all local branches to dissuade students from coming to Beijing. Wan Li, chairman of the NPC Standing Committee, ended his official visit to the United States ahead of schedule for health reasons and started his journey home in the afternoon. Since the imposition of the martial law 4 days ago, the situation in Beijing was getting stable. 148 bus and trolley lines were reopened for traffic. The subway ended its 3-day business suspension. The urban streets were open for traffic, market supply was smooth, and residents were calm and collected. Tiananmen Square was still occupied by student petitioners. The Red Cross Society of China, which had been rescuing the students at Tiananmen Square ever since the beginning of the hunger strike, issued an urgent appeal. As Tiananmen Square is in an adverse condition and epidemic diseases are liable to break out at any time, we urgently call upon the students to retreat from the square immediately, and we hope residents, old people, and children in particular won't come to Tiananmen Square. At 1:30 in the afternoon, people from the capitals, universities, and colleges, factories, and mines, enterprises, intellectual, literary, and art and press circles once more took to Tiananmen Square and the eastern and western sections of Chang'an Avenue for demonstrations. Most of their slogans vilified the state council leaders, while the rest demanded withdrawal of the troops, rescinding of the martial law, upholding of the Constitution, and safeguarding of human rights. The illegal union of Beijing's intelligentsia was formally founded, with Bao Zunxin in charge of its general affairs. Meanwhile, a duplicated copy of its inauguration declaration was published in full in Taiwan's daily newspaper, Lin Ho Pao. The declaration slandered the central authorities' decision and the martial law order of the State Council as a perverse act, and appealed for an immediate meeting by the MPC Standing Committee to discuss the proposal for removing Li Peng. In the evening, they called on members of the union to launch a sit-down protest at Tiananmen Square and distributed the new express they had compiled. They reviled Comrade Li Peng and threatened to march him to the guillotine of history. At about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Yu Mingfei, teacher of Guandu Middle School in Liaoyang of Hunan Province, Yu Yuedong, art editor of Liaoyang Daily, and Lu Decheng, worker of Liaoyang Motorcade, tarnished with printing ink the portrait of Mao Zedong on Tiananmen Gate Tower. They were caught on the spot by university students and residents who were staying nearby to help preserve order and were handed over to the Public Security Office. In Beijing's streets was spread a leaflet entitled Our Suggestions. It was distributed in the name of the Autonomous Student Union of Beijing Teachers University, but was actually drafted by Liu Xiaobo. This leaflet vilified the Chinese government elected by the National People's Congress as a bogus government and demanded the bogus government resign and Li Peng step down. It slandered the martial law imposed in parts of Beijing as military control and instigated the mobilization of the whole society to thwart the military control. It also incited workers of state-owned enterprises to form an autonomous union which can really stand for their own interests, and agitated non-governmental enterprises to publicly demand putting enterprises on a private footing, so as to ensure the private ownership of the property rights. It tried to sow dissensions between the 8 democratic parties of China and the Chinese Communist Party, instigating them to break away from the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party, and to openly and clearly demand of the government their independent participation in government and political affairs in a planned way, thus to become democratic parties with truly independent rights. May 24th. During the 11 days of the students' hunger strike, which later changed to sit-in demonstrations at the Tiananmen Square, the government entrusted the Red Cross Society to organize the capital's medical circles to try their best to save the lives of the students. No one has died up till now. Up to 6 p.m., 32 hospitals in Beijing have treated 9,158 person time of students altogether, with 8,205 person time on observation in hospitals. Only 66 students are still under observation in several hospitals. Early this morning, students from Beijing and other parts of China made a vow at the Tiananmen Square. First, Chai Ling, the general commander of the newly formed Tiananmen Square headquarters, read out an oath for inauguration. Then Wang Dan, standing committee member of the Autonomous Union of University Students AUUS, made a speech entitled The Last Struggle Between Brightness and Darkness. Finally, students stood with their hands up and read out the Declaration of Safeguarding Tiananmen Square. They planned to occupy the Tiananmen Square by force indefinitely. The Tiananmen Square headquarters and joint conference of people from all walks of life of the capital proclaimed their founding. In this way, the Union of Capitals Intelligentsia, organized by Yan Jiaqi, Bao Zunxin, and others, formed a sacred alliance with the Beijing Autonomous Union of University Students, Autonomous Union of Beijing Residents, Dare to Die Corps of Beijing Workers, Pickets of Beijing Workers, and Dare to Die Corps of Beijing Residents. They clamored in their oath to topple the Chinese government, fearing neither bloodshed nor sacrifice. Altogether, 174 public trolley and bus lines were open in the whole city. May 25th. When meeting with the newly appointed Nigerian, Mexican, and Burmese ambassadors to China, Premier Li Peng of the State Council said, "According to Clause 16 of Article 89 of the Constitution, we enforce martial law in parts of Beijing, which is an alarming measure adopted to firmly prevent the turmoil. Martial law enforcement is different from military control. Military control is a measure adopted in some countries by military authorities when the whole country or parts of the country is out of control. The government is unable to perform its administrative functions, hence, military authorities take up the entire or part of the functions of the government. Nothing like this has happened in China today." Li Peng said, "Today is the 6th day since the martial law has been enforced. The martial law enforcement troops are intercepted and have not entered the central area of Beijing. This is not because the troops have no ability to enter the city, but because our government is a people's government and the People's Liberation Army is the people's army. When people have not fully understood the meaning of martial law, the troops have displayed the greatest restraint in order to avoid conflicts. We believe that to maintain the stability and order in Beijing fully conforms to the interests of Beijing residents and the whole country, and it will be eventually understood and supported by the people." The State Council issued an emergency notice demanding that governments, public security, and railway departments at all localities firmly prevent the provincial students from attacking railways and forcibly taking trains to come into Beijing. At 3 o'clock this morning, Wan Li, chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, ended his visits to Canada and America and returned to China from America. After a doctor's examination, Wan Li would stay in Shanghai for treatment since he was in bad health. Today's Hong Kong newspaper, Wen Hui Pao, carried news about a proposal signed by 57 NPC Standing Committee members, including Hu Ji-wei, for an emergency meeting of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. It reportedly said, "Important issues of the emergency meeting will include the dismissal of Li Peng from office and problems needed to be handled urgently." Leaders of the AUUS held a meeting, made 2 sets of plans, and decided to attack the government in a most radical way. They also sent 5 propaganda corps to different parts of the country to establish ties for a united action in the whole country. This afternoon, large-scale demonstrations appeared along the east and west Chang'an Avenue and around the Tiananmen Square. The streamers carried by the demonstrators showed that they were from scientific, educational, medical, cultural, press units, as well as some factories. Among them were also students from other parts of China. The demonstrations were illegally organized by the Union of China's Intelligentsia and Autonomous Union of Workers, AUW. Written on their banners were, "Welcome Wan Li to call the National People's Congress," and they chanted, "Call an emergency meeting of the NPC at once. Dismiss Li Peng as premier. Withdraw martial law," and other slogans. May 26th. Chen Yun, chairman of the CPC Central Advisory Commission, presided over a meeting of its standing committee. All comrades present unanimously supported the correct policy and resolute measure adopted by the central government in order to prevent the turmoil and to stabilize the situation. Entrusted by the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, Peng Zhen, former chairman of the NPC Standing Committee, invited non-party vice chairman of the NPC Standing Committee to hold a forum. He made an important speech entitled, "Seek Unity of Thinking in Accordance with the Constitution and Laws," setting forth relevant regulations stipulated in the Constitution and laws. He said, "Because of the unrest, state affairs such as the welcoming ceremony and other activities in honor of Gorbachev could not be conducted normally. Traffic became a problem and people even couldn't go to work. Does the capital still have any order? Is it still possible to say that the interests of the country and society are not harmed? Isn't this a turmoil?" He also quoted relevant articles from the Constitution and pointed out that it was legal for the State Council to enforce martial law in some sections of Beijing. Peng Zhen pointed out, "Any organization and any individual must abide by the Constitution and the laws. Some people paid lip service to legal systems. They had, in fact, not only trampled the Constitution and laws themselves, but also instigated others to violate the Constitution and laws. Hence, students and people from all walks of life must heighten their vigilance." Non-party vice chairman attending the forum expressed their firm support for the party and that they would work with the Communist Party to stabilize the situation and solve the problems through democratic and legal procedures. Today is the 7th day since the martial law has been enforced. Many students on the Tiananmen Square moved to the shade of trees in front of the Great Hall of the People in the Museum of Chinese History because of the scorching weather. In front of the Beijing railway station, a large number of provincial students lined up, waiting for trains leaving Beijing for home. A responsible person at the station said that they had already prepared some special trains and carriages to take these students back. The martial law troops, still waiting for orders outside Beijing, began to receive groups sent by governments at all levels to convey greetings and appreciation. Some soldiers and officers had get-togethers with local residents. Yang Jieqi and Bao Zunxin published an article entitled Solve China's Present Problems in a Democratic and Legal Way. This also serves as a letter to Li Peng in Hong Kong newspapers clamoring to rescind martial law and remove Li Peng from office. More than 300 representatives of the AUUS had a discussion all night long and voted. Chai Ling, the general commander of the Tiananmen Square headquarters, declared at 9 o'clock in the morning, in the future, students would hold fast to Tiananmen Square, unite with people from all walks of life, hit out actively, organize large-scale demonstrations, and lay siege to Zhongnanhai in order to put more pressure on the government. The illegal organization, Beijing Workers' Autonomous Union Preparatory Committee, held a press conference attended by both foreign and Chinese journalists in the east of Tiananmen Square, declaring its founding. End of Appendix, Part 2.